Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the No Limit Selling Podcast. And today we have Victor Antonio here with us. And the reason I want to talk to him is he is a prophet. Many years ago, he had this crazy notion that AI was coming and it was going to make a difference in sales. And everyone said, "What are you, nuts? I have to be there. It's a human to human contact sport. You are nuts." And but you didn't listen. You predicted this was coming. What was the response in the book when you first came out with that notion, AI is coming? What did people say?
So the title of the book is Sales Ex Machina. Ex Machina means from the machine.
Mm-hmm.
Here was my play on words. Sales from the machine, which is from the CRM. So in other words, that's where all the data lives.
Right.
And so that's where you determine what customers to go after. And so when I launched the book, it was January 2018. So was it 7 years ago now? And when I launched the book, I think I might have sold 50 copies, Umar, if I was lucky, because people were like, "I don't understand what you're talking about." Because this is 4 years before ChatGPT launched, which was in November of 2022. It's almost like 5 years afterwards. And so it was, yeah, nobody really got it, and I would do presentations. And what was funny, Umar, is that when I did these presentations, people were like still staring at the screen like, I don't know what you're talking about. It doesn't make sense. And now, when I do the presentations, I get I don't make sense. It kind of makes sense. They're still a little confused about what's happening, which is why I'm writing a new book called The Future of Selling.
Yeah. And we're getting closer to the future, like faster and faster as time goes on. It's kind of an amazing time. It kind of made me think of like ChatGPT. The first revolution that I thought was like amazing was, do you remember way back when they had the Palm Pilot?
Yes, I had one.
So somebody had one, and it was like when they first came out,
yeah.
And he showed it to me. And when I saw it, I think I sold 5 of them before I purchased my own because I was so excited about that technology. It was like a pivotal kind of entry into what phones could be, even though it wasn't a phone at the time.
Right.
And you had no idea what that would turn into, which it turned into the iPhone, which is
precursor
to that allowed that thought process to happen.
Yeah.
And now as we get close to the future of selling, it's going to be really interesting because right now I can go into, say, research this company, see if you can find out what technology systems they have, what could be a trigger event, and what message do I have to craft? What's my strategy to go into that account? And you get a really good first starting step.
It is.
You can't believe everything AI says, but it gives you a leg up that you couldn't do before without a ton of research.
Yes. Here's how I look at it. And that, what you just mentioned is what I call table stakes, right? That's anybody can do that now.
Right.
The transformation that's coming is beyond that. It's way beyond that. And I think people don't get it. And so I think it's interesting to go back a little bit. I graduated with an electrical engineering degree, and I was working over at Honeywell, their undersea systems division, torpedo systems at the time. And so this was late 80s. I'm dating myself. And so the torpedo had a signature recognition AI blackboard system. It was an expert system, rule-based, if then go to. And the reason AI struggled back in the day is that you had to program all these rules, right? You had to find the expert, get the expert to put their knowledge into the actual software, so to speak, through all these rules. And it wasn't scalable. Fast forward, we got more data, we got more processing power, and the algorithms, machine learning, deep learning, where now you don't have to program the machine. The machine, if you train it a bit, it can train itself after a while.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden we have this exponential growth that people kind of go, okay, that's interesting. I always get that reaction. Well, that's interesting. No, this is beyond interesting. This is like, to me, AI is ahead of any. When you even think about the steam engine, all these other pivotal eras in humanity, I think AI is the one.
Right.
Maybe when we get to quantum, I think maybe when we get to quantum computing, we can kind of have another conversation on that. But on AI itself, I don't think people understand that this is different. And so, and everybody thinks that AI is ChatGPT, and I'm like, no, that's one of the products of it, the byproducts. What's his name? Yuval Harari, who wrote the book *Sapiens*.
Yes.
He said something that was just like a mind blower because it's such a simple statement, but very powerful. He said, ChatGPT is like the amoeba, like the one-celled amoeba of AI. And I'm like, well, that's heavy. right?
Oh
But
yeah.
I go, he gets it. He says, we're at the beginning of something that we really don't understand what's about to come. And so as I'm writing The Future of Selling, the book, it's probably going to have the same effect as the first one. If people are going to go, I don't get it. And that is because you're going to hear the word agentic a lot. Agentic meaning you're using agents to actually do the whole workflow.
Mm,
And people were like, what do you mean, Victor? And so I'll take a step back. About a year and a half, 2 years ago, a company called AI released a conversation. I don't know if you've seen that Tesla conversation where it's the thing. So what happens is somebody goes to a Tesla website, downloads the brochure. Immediately, the bot calls using natural language processing. The bot
right.
calls. Not only says, "Hey, I saw you just downloaded this. Do you have any questions?" And if you really listen to the conversation, you know, the bot is asking like open-ended questions, close-ended questions. At the end of the deal, at the end of the conversation, closes the deal by getting the person to come in. Now, that was 2 years ago. And when I saw them, like, this is the future. This cold calling is going to be the bot. And so, the pushback I often get is, yeah, Victor, but they don't sound human. They'll never be able to connect. And I'm going, we're at the beginning, the one cell amoeba stage. And so keep that in mind. So now I can do that. Then if I can give you another story, I think that this kind of ties into the second
Right.
part. There's a company called Luke. And Luke came out with these bots. You can design your own avatar
Did
slash
they
bot.
have a lukewarm reception? No, sorry. Can't help
No.
myself.
Yeah, okay. The company's called, they got these bots called Replica. And so what
Right.
happened, Umar, is that I think the price was like for $99 a month, you can program your bot, right? And it remembers, has what they call large context window, which means it remembers every conversation you've ever had. So people love that. But it also had, this is where it went off the rails a little bit, it had something called an erotic role play feature.
Right.
Yeah. And so for $2.99 a month, you can activate the erotic role play feature, right? And so you can live out your fantasy, so to speak. Well, the company got complaints, right? So Luke decided to just say, you know what, let's eliminate that, right? Eliminate that. What happens? If you go on Reddit, you'll see this. They had to set up a suicide hotline for people
Right.
because they were talking about, taking that feature away was like lobotomizing my best friend. And so when people say, one, it doesn't sound human, I say it will be. Two, it can't connect. I beg to differ, it will. And then this past year, 2024, in February, there's the first suicide associated with a character, with an avatar. So
Right.
character.ai, the company is getting sued because in the young man, he was like 15 or 16, had a relationship with the bot, right? And then told the bot, I'm thinking of ending my life. The bot said, no, don't do that. Don't do that, right? And so went back and forth. About a month later, he changed the word. He used the euphemism. He told the bot, I want to come home to you. The bot
Right.
said, come on home. Kid goes to the bathroom, shoots himself, right? And so I tell this not to be morbid, but to say that this is real, that these bots are going to be both positive and negative on society. And I think we haven't given much thought to that they will be able to communicate, they will be able to connect, and they will be able to engage people. Now take that to the next higher order, and all of a sudden, we're going to have bots that can do the jobs of a lot of salespeople. I think the business of SDRs is going to be wiped out.
And I think it's going to go upscale. A couple of things come up.
Yeah.
Number one, there was an AI expert talking about the Turing test, which is,
Yes.
could you have back in the day, a text conversation with a computer and not realize it for 20 minutes, it would
Yeah.
have arrived. And so this AI expert was,
Mhm.
human. He's also dating, and he found this, beautiful woman in Russia that he's having a text conversation with. And he says 3 months into the relationship, he misspelled something, and the sentence he wrote was like stupid. It didn't make any sense.
Mm.
And the bot responded, and he went, "Oh my God, I'm an AI expert. I had no idea I was talking to a bot for three
Yeah.
months."
Isn't that something?
Second point is a lot of YouTube videos
Mm.
now have AI voices
Yes.
that are so good
Yeah.
that particular voice is on probably tens of thousands of videos that just sounds like a human. And it sounds like, oh, it must be a a voiceover actor because he's really popular. And it's like, nope, it's a bot, baby.
Yeah, it's getting to the point where you can't tell. I forgot what the company is that just came out. It wasn't Mid-Journey, but it's so the videos are so realistic now you can't tell. In the future, you just won't be able to tell. And people are like, "I'll be able to tell." I'm like, "Shut up! You won't be able to tell." It's it'll be kind of cat and mouse. In other words, they'll develop an algorithm to detect fakes, and the fakes will actually start getting better. But I think when the future of selling as a book is based on how AI agents will be deployed in any organization. And if you listen to any other top experts, and even the manufacturer, whether you listen to Jensen Huang, who's the CEO of NVIDIA, Mark Zuckerberg, the folks over at OpenAI, Sam Altman, you listen to some of these guys, what they're talking about. They're talking about not millions, but billions of agents, and how you're going to have a lot of unicorn companies. These are $1 billion valuation companies, which may only have like one person running it because they can use agents. And I tell people this, and they're like, well, that's impossible, Victor. I'm like, no, it's very possible. I think it's a coming wave. Like I say, if I look at SDRs, I can AI agent them out easily. I look at customer support, gone. And by the way, when I say gone, I'm saying 80 to 90% will be just gone. What they'll do,
Yeah.
I don't know. And last point here, I was listening to Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, and he used a euphemism that I'm starting to hear a lot of companies that are delivering AI saying, that is, what we're going to have to do is rebalance our workforce. I know what that
Yeah.
means.
Well,
Yeah.
we know what that means. So here's let's kind of take a step back. We're going to come back to AI because I think that is the future, and it's but sales training
Mhm.
is something that you've done in the past and you've experienced. So a sales trainer comes into, let's say I'm right downtown Toronto right now,
Right.
comes to downtown Toronto, 100 sales reps go into that sales training.
Mhm.
This person walks on water, is a phenomenal trainer, probably the best they've ever seen.
Mm.
Uh, on Monday, when they come back to work on Monday, when I ask sales managers how many people it would have changed their life and they would set the
Mm.
world on fire, and they say usually 2 to 5% of those people are going to
Yeah.
come back and it's going to revolutionize the way they do sales, and they're going to go from B players to A players and set the world on fire. I said,
Right.
great. How many people are going to have loved the training and won't change a single thing? And the
Mm.
answer comes back, maybe 50, 60% will basically enjoyed it but don't change anything, and the
Mm.
other people change a few things and keep them, and some of them change a few things and go back to normal, their
Yeah.
old way of doing things.
Right.
So why do you think that happens when there's clearly really good techniques to be a better salesperson?
Right.
It's got a proven track record, but yet getting humans to adopt it is so challenging. Why do you think that happens, and how can we make sales training stick, uh, let's say right here in Toronto?
So nobody's ever asked me that question. It's a great question. The definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, right? Expecting
Yes.
different results. So there's culpability on both sides of this insanity we call training. On the one side, the company says, "Hey, I want to train my salespeople," and then you have sales trainers on the other side. Here's where the insanity exists. I don't blame the sales trainers. I blame the company because they think it's a one-off. They treat training as a one-off.
Mm.
And
A
this will answer your
motivational
question.
event.
Yeah, just one event. It's almost like, hey, shower once a year. You're good for the
Yeah.
rest of the year. And so they don't see it as a continuous event. So that's the insanity of it. They bring in a sales trainer, can walk on water, but at the end of the day, the brain is the brain. And
Right.
we know from like the Ebbinghaus retention curve, like within 24 hours, you'll forget 75%. At the end of 30 days, you'll forget 90%. And the 10% you recall, only 5% is actually accurate. So your retention after a month is only 5%. Now, let's just stop there, Umar. If we know that, why haven't we changed this insanity of how we train people and make it more continuous? And so when I get the questions, because I've had this question many times, I said, Victor, how do I know your sales training is going to really impact my people? I said, look, that whole, bring the horse to the trough, that's all I can do. They'll have to
Right.
drink the water. I can't do it for them. And so what I've tried to do in my sales training is within that framework of insanity of doing it one time, I've actually reduced the amount of content that I deliver. And then what I do is I'll focus on on average, three specific problems. So before I go into the training, I'll say, Umar, what are the top three things we need to solve here that would make a difference, right? Step one, you tell me, here are the three things, Victor. I
Okay,
build the
Victor,
training around
before you
that.
go on, you've worked with a lot of sales teams.
Yeah.
Top of mind, what would be the three biggest areas, problem areas for sales teams and salespeople
Mm.
as you continue on this example?
The biggest one I'm seeing now is that, nobody wants to pick up the phone, make the call, right? Prospecting. Everybody wants to depend on their tech stack to actually do it for them. Send an email, do this, LinkedIn, the whole thing. There's a sense of atrophy,
Yes.
and that atrophy accelerated, I think, or I just say increased dramatically during the pandemic. We just got lazy. Some companies were doing so well during the pandemic that they didn't bother to do any outbound, and therefore now the sales are drying up, and they're like, but we forgot how to sell because we've been doing this for 2 years, and now
Yeah.
So there's this atrophy piece, right? The second is I had a customer yesterday. We're going to do some training, and their biggest problem is complacency, in the sense that it's almost the same thing but a little different, and that is they got great sales coming in, but the president's going, I know there's more business there, but I can't get these people to actually expand. And so they have several problems there. One is complacency. I think the other one is the way they set up their. I think the way you set up a compensation structure, territory and compensation structure, is so important to driving motivation and moving the numbers up. Most people don't get that. A lot of companies don't get that. I can't tell you how many companies I've talked to, Umar, a small tangent. One of the questions I ask is, tell me how their compensation program is set up. And they'll
Right.
just, dither about it, right? And then I go, okay, well, let me ask it a different way. Do they have a quota? He goes, yes. I said, do you hold them to the quota? And is the compensation tied to that quota? Well, not really. Well, then it's not a quota. It's a
Right.
goal. And if they don't hit the goal, well, they don't hit the goal, right? There's no repercussions.
Right.
We in salespeople, we need incentives. We love carrots and sticks. True salespeople go, give me a number, and if I hit it, just pay me. And then next year, I expect that number to go up even more. Then I figure out ways of doing that. I start scaling up. So back to your question, one is complacency. Pick up the phone is the other one, and maybe on presentation and persuasion in terms of how to, really persuade a person to take the next step and ask for the order. And a lot of times, salespeople don't ask for the order.
Yeah, which is all about the mindset around, well, I'll seem too needy, too pushy, or whatever they're telling themselves inside. So you help the client identify the three biggest problems they have
Right.
is step one of your training process. Then what's step
Identify the
two?
three problems. And then what we do is we focus the training on just those three things. And by the way, I try to get consensus while I'm there. So, because
Mm,
the thing is, talking to management is one thing, talking to the actual salesperson. So I usually talk to management and I say, let me talk to your sales leader or your top salespeople. And they're usually more honest, not to say that the leaders aren't, but the people at the front line see it for what it is. I
mm.
go, where are we struggling? Where are we having problems with? And, in many cases, they do coincide the top three things. So now when I'm doing the workshop, we focus on those three things. So let's make it easy for visuals here. Let's say it's four things. What I do is I spend 2 hours on four different things and I go deep on them. And so here's what happens. I'll train somebody. Like one of my most popular modules is blocking objections. And
Right.
I explain the psychology of why it works. That if you raise the objection, you control the conversation. If somebody raises the objection, then you have to defend yourself. That's never a good position to be in. So then I would walk them through this exercise. All right, let's list out, and I call it the 357 rule. There's only 3, 5, maybe 7 objections that you'll get that are just common. What are they? Right? And what I do, I spend 2 hours going through the 3, 5, or 7. It's typically, let's say on average, 5.
Yeah.
We go through the objections and the structure of how to block them. Here's how you raise it. How you offer to resolve it. Here's what you're going to demo. And then here's how you're going to tie down that objection.
Nice.
And so when I walk them through that process, they go, okay, so now you know how to block objections. And I make them write out the script in front of me, like literally make them write out the script. Because they go, okay, we get it. I go, no, you don't. So I usually tell them, I said, no, you don't. Up here, it makes sense. But when you have to do it, write it down or say it, it's difficult.
And it makes sense now, but tomorrow you're going to forget it. So write it down. Yeah.
Write it down. And so what happens is they think they have it. It's almost like everything sounds better in your head. Even like the song that you sing, it sounds better in your head till you start when you open your
I'm
mouth.
actually way handsomer inside my head than I am in real life. It's quite
That's
depressing.
It's a beautiful imagination you have, right? So do I. So do I. And so they then write it out, and I can't tell you, this has happened every time. They go through the structure and they struggle. And so we spend 2 hours on that. By the time we're done with the 2 hours, they get not only one, okay, here are the problem, here are the objections, here are the 5. I go, if you can knock these 5s down, you'll feel the anxiety / resistance go down. And then, and by the way, in that one, I also teach them on a sequence. Here's which objection you block first. Here's the one you block second, third, fourth, and fifth. And then what
Okay.
you'll feel is the resistance go down and they're ready for you to just say,
Okay.
based on what I've shown you. Yeah.
So here's something kind of interesting is
By the way, for those who are listening, he just gave me the timeout signal visually.
yes, it was like because the important point that you raised there. So when you have new parents and they've got this newborn life in their household, and mom and dad are going out on their first date, might be 3 months or 4 months into this kid arriving in their house, mom is freaking out because she's leaving the baby with somebody to babysit the kid, and the kid may die, which of course is not going to happen, but that's what she's thinking.
Right.
So she is anxious.
Right.
Guess who picks it up? The baby. So the baby starts fussing, and what does the mom do? Takes it in the bedroom, lies down with the baby, and when she calms down, the baby calms down. So when you take the anxiety out of salespeople on the objections, by definition, if you're in rapport with your customer, you're also reducing their anxiety too.
Yes.
Which is a powerful thing to getting them to say yes, or at least listening for the opportunity to say yes. So powerful on many fronts.
By the way, it also, to your point, very well stated, add to that it builds credibility.
Yeah.
Because when you raise an objection, the person goes, I was thinking that, I'm glad he brought it up, because I didn't want to ask, right? But also the fact that you're bringing it up. With every objection you raise, you're like, well, this person's pretty much upfront with everything. He's pretty straightforward. And that not only reduces anxiety, it increases their certainty.
And trust.
Yes.
And trust is the platform for communications and sales and life and all that stuff.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that, because I think we need to change this thing about trust that quickly. And I think I want you to imagine, if you will, certainty, revenue and cost. Just bear with me on this visual.
Right.
You've got revenue and cost, right? The job of any company is to increase revenue, reduce costs, you increase profit margin. Very basic stuff. Now, let me change the model a little bit. You got certainty and anxiety.
Yes.
Our job is to increase certainty, reduce anxiety, and what you generate is a high confidence margin.
Right.
Because I don't know you, right? So for me to make it to say I trust you, well, I don't trust. I just met you. So let's think of a residential sale. You're coming in, I need my roof repaired, right? I'm looking for a new roof. There's no way you're going to build trust with me quickly. You can demonstrate your expertise. But what I want you to demonstrate is that you know what you're talking about, increase certainty, and reduce my anxiety that this is going to work. And that confidence factor is what we're looking for. Right. Trust is built over time, but in the moment of closing a deal, I think what you want to do is increase confidence that this is the right move for you. And that's what you want to do. Reduce their anxiety that they're making the wrong decision, increase the certainty, this is the way to go. That's what people want. When people always say, well, you got to build trust. Well, that trust is over time. You can't accelerate trust. So trust has a time function, but confidence is almost immediate, like a step function.
I like that. Good, good distinction. So training is one thing. So what do you do when someone has call reluctance? Like they need to pick up the phone. I was Jeb Blount was on the show recently.
Oh, my man Jeb.
He's
fanatical prospecting. Right. I mean, in terms of like cold calling and stuff like that, that's probably the best book out there you can get, and probably the best trainer you can get.
Absolutely. And I think what's kind of interesting is there's just this one small area in the book where he basically says, this is what you say, but there's a whole book built around it to give you the expertise to get to that. Right. Hey, I'm Umar from No Limit Selling, and this is why I'm calling you, and just get to the point. And I like his get to the point and get a yes or a no really quickly, and then just move on, rather than saying the magic words that might be this elixir that'll get people that don't want to buy. But you need that whole book to get that level of confidence in yourself to execute. Because I think cold calling is pretty much the first 15 seconds of the call decides what's going to happen. Right. And how you show up to that first 15 seconds is critical. But anyway, what Jeb was saying was with these new AI agents, you can get them to send emails out to do automated prospecting. Sure. And he says it's gotten so bad that VPs have basically stopped looking at email altogether. Has killed that.
By the way, not only VPs, you and I, everybody. When we log in the morning, We look at the email. What's the first thing we do? Start figuring out what to delete and get it
Yep.
down to a reasonable number.
Absolutely. And so he said, it's back down to this.
Yep.
And he was basically stop being a wimp, use the phone.
Sure.
That still works.
It does. I think the 100% agree. So we have to understand. So what's happening? You have a generation that's been weaned on technology, iPads, iPhones. They text. How many times? I don't know if it's happened to you, but I call my daughter, doesn't answer, and then she texts me back. What do you need? I'm like, I need you to answer the phone is what I need you to do. It's that whole thing. So there's a whole conversation about multi-channel communication and what people prefer depending on the generation. So the cold calling is always going to be important. So the original question was like, what causes cold call reluctance? I like to look at the psychology of things. When my podcast, Sales Influence, always about finding the why and how people buy, or it could also be stated, or why they don't buy. And I like the psychology of call reluctance because I think it's a fascinating study. You can go down a rabbit hole on this one. Let's start out with something basic. As kids, we're taught, only speak when you're spoken to, and never interrupt adults while they're talking.
Very British, yeah.
Right.
I was raised in England.
Yeah. Okay, well, very Spanish too. And so one could argue it's universal. And so that programming is there, like a hobgoblin of the mind. It's there, right? So all of a sudden, you're like, when you're thinking of cold calling somebody, you're like, I'm about to interrupt somebody. Now, you may not consciously think about it, but you're thinking about it. So one is I'll say the programming that we've had over the past, right? Number two is the experience. In the past, when we called somebody, it didn't work out. And what we tend to do is we tend to amplify that, and make it this huge monster. Like, oh my God, but last time I did this. So your past also holds you back. So not only your programming norms, your experience holds you back. And then I think the big one that nobody talks about, I think this is an interesting one because it's almost like the ghost in the machine. It's something called the fundamental attribution error. And the fundamental attribution error means you attribute something to something that isn't really real. So for example, let's say you're working on a deal. The person is excited. Victor, we're going to go forward. We're going to do this deal, right? You're like, oh yeah, get back. You tell your manager, that's a done deal. Week goes by, nothing. 2 weeks, you're ghosted. 3 weeks, you're pissed off. You're like, God, I can't believe this person lied to me. And you start screaming up a storm. And all of a sudden, on the fourth week, they finally call. And the person says something like this: Victor, I'm sorry I didn't get back to you. I was in a car accident. I've been hospitalized for the last 3.5 weeks or whatever it may be. And all of a sudden, you feel like an idiot. Now, what happened in that time? You imagined that this person was just being a jerk. Wasn't telling you the truth, was being dishonest. And so we project these ghosts sometimes, and that holds us back from making a call. Well, now's not a good time to call because maybe they're at lunch. Okay? That's the ghost, right? So you started, and I see people do this all the time. They imagine this. And I'm like, what's the worst that can happen? They say no, you hang up. Just pick up the phone and call. I think the last part, if I could just add this from a practical standpoint, I think if you mentally condition yourself to cold call during a certain time slot and be very consistent in that. So if for example, I love have you ever read Daniel Pink's book, When?
Yes.
It's called When. Okay. If you'll remember the part that there's this biorhythm we have, and our peak attention is somewhere between 6 in the morning to 11 in the morning. That's when we're at peak attention, right?
Right.
And then after 1 o'clock, we just drop. And I always thought that was interesting because I'm like, if I'm cold calling, it's only going to be in the morning time slots. I'm not calling in the afternoon unless you want to call after 5 when people kick back in again. So for those of you who are afraid of cold calling and have all the reluctance, I think one thing that helps you reduce that fear is to schedule a time block. It's the easiest way of saying
Absolutely. And I think, A, that just becomes habitual. And B, if you get it done in the morning, because if you leave till the afternoon, you're going to find excuses and create excuses not to do it. So if it's the first thing in the morning, there's nothing in your way.
By the way, the best tip, before I forget to mention, Umar, I'm sorry to interrupt. The best tip I ever got was call a couple of customers you already have before you get into cold calling.
Right.
Kind of build this mental momentum and then just jump into it.
Absolutely. The other thing is, the only thing I'd add to that is, for whatever reason, Thursday afternoons
Uh,
is a great time to do cold calling,
yeah.
because a lot of people are sitting at the desk getting their work for the week done
Yeah.
in case something happens on Friday. So they happen to be near the phone.
Yep.
And if you're trying to get a hold of three people that have been really, really difficult and you accidentally get a hold of the first person,
Mm.
I'm not sure why the universe works this way.
Uh-huh.
There's a really good chance the other two total strangers in different parts of the country will be at their freaking phone at the same time.
Yeah, that's
And I
funny.
found that to be a true statement. I'm not sure why, but
I love that.
so
Love
before
that.
we part company, mindset is such a critical part of sales, because basically the person we're fighting is the enemy is not outside, it's within.
Yeah.
So why is having a strong mindset so critical to sales success? And why is mindset training a really important element to
Yeah.
sales success?
It's funny you asked that question, because I think I'm reading a book called The Expectation Effect,
Mm,
and because it really ties into mindset. And so I used to always say ABC when it comes to selling. And people go, always be closed. I go, no. Attitude drives behavior.
mhm.
Behavior drives your consequence, right? So attitude drives behavior. Behavior drives your consequence, the outcome. The question then becomes, where does the attitude come from? It's an
Right,
important question, right? And the attitude comes from, and I go back to three things always, like knowledge, right? I know because I've done this before, the
right.
experience, good or bad, and I always say social norms, right? So I bring all this weight sometimes. So what I've learned to do in the book, The Expectancy Effect, it's really interesting because it kind of highlights what I'd known, but it's nice to hear somebody else say it, is that you have to catch yourself in a negative mood and be aware, like, why am I mad? Like, why am I afraid to call this person? And then you start almost deconstructing, almost like a lawyer, with a
Right.
counter argument saying, well, why am I negative? Oh, because I got to make these calls. Well, yeah, you got to make 5 calls every day. I get that. And all of a sudden you start, in other words, by just analyzing, something interesting happens. You move it away from your logical side or your emotional side, and you move it over to the logical side, which you can deal with. By just
It's like
saying,
the
well,
monster underneath the bed. Is once
yeah.
you get the flashlight, look underneath the bed. It's like, well, it's only 5
Yeah.
calls. It's not that big
And
a
so,
deal.
so the flashlight is getting out of the bed is you being aware. So, okay, something's on the bed. Let me deal with this thing. Let me see if there's something really under the bed. Get the flashlight, your tools, your phone. You flashlight, you realize there's no monster. No customer is a monster. So I think, I love the phrase mindset because it's how your mind is set. If you want to analyze this, and a lot of mindset comes from what you expect to happen. Like, for example, if you're good at something, you're more likely to want to do it. But if you've never done it or failed in the past, you're less likely to do it. You'll procrastinate more. That's
So
that's the
beliefs
irony.
are a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if my belief is, let's say you get somebody walking into a bar and their belief is they are incredibly attractive to women,
Mhm.
just the way they walk in has a swagger and a confidence and if 5 women reject and one goes, hi, then it
Mhm.
just validates that belief and that strengthens it. You disregard the others.
Mhm.
And if it was cold calling is disturbing people, cold calling doesn't work, then you're going to manifest that proof that it does not work. The
Well,
first person that says get lost is like, see, it doesn't work. I
yeah,
knew
it's like
it.
they call it the Bader-Meinhof effect. It's that effect you
Mm.
get when you buy a car, then the next day you start seeing that car on the road.
Oh, yeah.
That's the Bader-Meinhof. And so if you say to yourself, cold calling is hard, then when you will look for proof to validate your point. That's even how it works in politics, right? If you're a Democrat, you'll look for information to validate your viewpoint, Republican, Libertarian, whatever it may be. And so we do that same thing. And so again, it requires this awareness to step outside yourself and say, okay, is this really that hard to do? But again, that takes practice. And a lot of people, again, I think psych themselves out too easily.
So one of the things I'm going to do in the next this week, hopefully, is get my first tattoo. And my first tattoo is going to have
I love
the
it.
word
Come
love.
on,
And the
you just
reason
don't look like a tattoo guy, but go for it, man.
I am
I love
not
it.
like, so here's why I want to get it
This,
is
I definitely want to hear this
when I
story.
look back at all the times in my life when
Hmm.
I was not my most gracious,
Yeah,
when it wasn't my finest moment,
sure.
and I think, what could I have done differently in that situation that would have made a difference?
Yeah.
And the answer that comes back is if I was in a place of love at that moment
Hmm.
for the customer, for the spouse, for the
Yes.
situation, I would have handled it totally differently.
Yes.
And if I think of all the times that people were mean and nasty and dishonest,
Mm.
and my reaction to it, if I was in a place of love, my reaction would have been different and the impact of what they did would have been reduced. So this year's resolution is approach all things coming from this place of love. So it doesn't mean don't do the work. It doesn't mean uh, I love you. It's more like, okay, if I was in a place of love, this podcast would be my gift to you, Victor, for
Mm.
you to shine. That I
Mm.
want to get the knowledge you have and share it with my audience,
Mm.
because that would create a much better experience for my audience. If love isn't there, then it's like, well, I want to be the smart one. I want to one up my guest to make
Mm.
sure I'm doing this, which would be the totally make the most boring interview ever. So anyway, that's my thing, is being self-aware enough to do that.
Good
And
for
I
you.
think that,
Wait a minute. How does that tie into the tattoo, though?
oh, it would just be on the wrist, and it would be like every morning it'd be like, okay, this is like freaking important
Gotcha.
to me. And that was kind of my thinking of it. And besides, my sister has tattoos and she wants us to get one.
That's
She's
cool.
been bugging me for 3 years. We have to get one together. So I finally came up with one that
Yeah.
would
That
allow
you
us
both agree on.
to bond. And so
Oh, so we
interesting.
we look forward to the tattoo. Everybody on this podcast looks forward to seeing your tattoo.
Yeah.
But by the way, I think it's important what you say, though. I think as we get older, I think I don't like to bandy around the word love. I'm not comfortable with it for different reasons. But
Yeah.
I'm just choosing my word. This is not a judgment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I like wisdom and patience. Do you know what I
Which
mean?
is almost a definition of that.
Yeah, if you can say love equals wisdom and patience, then I go, okay, I'll buy. Because I think what happens is you just become more aware and you become more patient and you put things in their proper perspective. In the past, you just kind of when you're young, you just go, now it's like you step back, and now I watch people spin like a Tasmanian devil. You know what I mean? When they get angry at me, I just stare at them like, let me know when you're done.
So tell me where this thing kind of hit home is. I was playing tennis with this guy I met at the health club. He says, do you play tennis? I said, yes. I'm not going to win any awards, but yeah, I play tennis. He says, come play with me, but we're not going to play for points.
What's your definition of play?
We're going to hit the ball back and forth. That's it. And I'm thinking, that sucks. But I go in being gracious and we start hitting the ball back and forth. He says, look, if you try and win and I try and win, the point's over in like a minute and a half.
Yeah.
If the object is to hit the ball back and forth, that's where you get expertise. So this guy's a really good coach. And then one day I was playing and he goes, you're trying too hard and you're trying to win. Stop doing that. And I said, all right, you communist. And so inside my head, I go, I'm going to step into a place of love, which is just being patient and slowing everything down.
Yes.
And all of a sudden I start hitting more accurately, more powerfully, more strategically. Yeah. And so I think in sales, when you come from that wisdom and patience, place your labels, and somebody has an objection, then it's like, oh, how can I get them to understand this?
Yes.
When you don't come from that, it's like, oh, I'm going to lose the sale. And I have to convince them. That's, I guess, the difference is when I'm trying to win, I have to convince you that objection isn't true. When I come from patience and wisdom, it's like, what must he be thinking to ask that question? Like, what's underneath that question?
That's very wise.
And it gives you that self-awareness and that patience to be more strategic in your response. And because you're coming from that place and my intent is different, the person receiving the answer for the objection receives it differently. And it's more like oh, okay, that answers my question, as opposed to, this guy's a good sales guy. He's trying to convince me to do X, Y, Z. Does that make sense?
Oh my God, it's so well said. You want to rewind that one. I can't add anything to that. It was so well said. I think salespeople miss that point, that when you really care about your customers, you're just trying to help them. And I think this is the part that creates some of the, if we can go back to call reluctance. If I don't really understand the value, I like to use the word value, but I'm very specific how I use value. And that is, how is this product or service going to benefit you? People go, well, we can use the product to, use the software to do X. No, how is it going to really benefit the company? companies got to be more competitive, more profitable, whatever it may increase revenue, reduce costs, or expand their market share. Yeah, but because their company grows, they can employ more people. Because they can employ more people, each of these people in that company probably have families,
Oh
2.3
yeah.
kids on average, right? So I don't view myself as selling a product. I look at myself as selling something that's going to help your company grow, employ more people, and that's the value I bring. It's beyond the product. It's everything surrounding that. And that's why I like your story, because I think it's true that once you say, I love your phrase when you said, why would that person ask that question? Or why would that
Mm.
person think that's an objection? Because all of a sudden you're taking their centric point of view. And I learned a new word the other day because I never heard of it. You may have heard of it. He says you move from egocentric to allocentric. And I've never heard the word
Me
allocentric.
either. Yeah.
So allocentric is basically if I say 6 inches from the microphone, that's me being egocentric because I'm looking at it from my point of
Mm.
view. But I say this microphone is about 3 feet from the door. Now it's other centric, and it's not
Mm.
coming through me. And so what you described was allocentric. It's like, well, let me look at it from your point of view and see what you're saying. And I think it takes patience and wisdom, and let's throw in some love for what you're doing and what you're providing, the value that customers that you really start thinking differently about sales. And all of a sudden, it's not about closing the deal. It's about really saying, here's how I can help you. It's a
Right.
totally different mindset. Here's how I can help you. And it's not, here's the product I want to sell. And so that's why I love the way you said it. You said it more eloquently.
And I think what's kind of interesting is, you know, I want to help you
Hmm.
uh, can be said by two people,
Hmm.
and one person truly wants to help that person,
Yeah.
and the other person is, I want to make that sale, and people can sense that and pick it up
Yes.
pretty easily. Like that ancient part of who we were as human beings is
Mhm.
so wise in just picking up, because literally it turns out that in less than a second we make judgments about people that we
Right.
see,
Mhm.
and the basic judgment is this safe or not?
Yes.
And so
Very primal. Very
it'll be
primal.
interesting how we move out into this brave new world, the future of selling, when there's this ancient animal called human,
Hmm.
and now we're coming into this brave new world.
Right.
And that book, by the way, is more relevant these days, Brave New World. I was forced to read it in high school.
Mm.
So, Victor, thank you so much for being on the show. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you.
Any parting words of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience?
I live by a motto: never aim for perfection, aim for success. If you're thinking of doing something, don't wait for the timing to be perfect. Don't wait for the product to be perfect. Don't wait for blank to be perfect. Execute and then iterate along the way.
Words to live by. Thank you so much for being on the show, and stay in the green room after the show. And hey, everybody, if you enjoyed this conversation, reach out to Victor on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
Uh, go on iTunes and Spotify. Give us a really good rating. And if you've got suggestions for other brilliant people, send those suggestions my way. Thanks so much. And looking forward to our next conversation, Victor.
Thank you, Mark. Pleasure.